Assistant Metro Editor Anika Varty and morning reporter Vonnai Phair unveil their approach to delivering what readers want on the morning news beat and beyond. Moderating this panel is Stefanie Loh. Stefanie is an assistant managing editor at the Seattle Times, where she oversees the features department, Pacific Northwest Magazine, and staff development. Steph has been at the Seattle Times since 2015, when she joined the sports staff as the WSU football beat reporter. Steph covered Coug football for 3 years before becoming an assistant sports editor and subsequently the features editor. Steph is an alum of the University of Oregon and is a past president of the Association of Women in Sports Media and the Football Writers Association of America. She is currently a Society for Features Journalism board member and is also active in AAJA. Please welcome Stefanie.
Thanks, y'all. Nothing like hearing your intro read back to you in robot voice. But yes, I'm Stefanie Loh, and you've heard my background, so I will not belabor the point. Thank you all for being here today. I am an assistant managing editor at the Seattle Times, and today we're going to talk to you a little bit about digital audience engagement and breaking news at the Seattle Times, specifically how we wake up our operation and get it going in the morning. So on my left is Vonnai Phair. She is a Coug. She's one of you. And Vonnai, why don't you say a few words about yourself?
So I graduated from WSU in 2021. I studied broadcast news and public relations, and now I am at the Seattle Times. I've been through a couple of different positions at the Times, and I'm currently the morning reporter, which we'll talk all about today. But yeah, I started in features with Steph and then moved over to Metro.
Also, can we get the slideshow going in the back there? Thank you. And next to Vonnai, it's Anika Varty.
Hi, I am Anika. As Steph said, I'm an assistant Metro editor at the Seattle Times. I did not go to Wazoo. I went to college in Pennsylvania, studied English, and then started at the Seattle Times in 2019 as a news producer. Doing a lot of digital engagement stuff, curating the homepage, doing social media and alert and newsletter strategy, and then moved into being our morning editor in 2021, and have been working with Vonnai since December 2023 when she became our morning reporter. I can talk a little bit about Sure. I can talk a little bit about some skills that I learned as a producer that I use as an editor. Working on our social media main accounts, you kind of learn how to see what folks are talking about online. We really commonly ask reporters, like, what are you hearing at the grocery store? What are you overhearing in coffee shops? If all of your neighbors are talking about something, we should probably do a story on it. The same is true for like what is happening on Seattle's Reddit threads, what's trending with local searches and things like that. So I like to bring that perspective to story selection. And also, I think that the most important thing about being an editor is being a stand-in and advocate for your audience. And understanding analytics with a nuanced view goes a long way with doing that. Vonnai and I are always talking about what we're seeing readers interested in and what potential follows we can do to stories that we see folks are really interested in. And then I also do a bit editing our race and equity coverage. And I think that's where having that like nuanced view of analytics is so important. Often, if you're just looking at page views, that can be a very narrow view of analytics. And so with stories that you may have spent a really long time on, even if the page view count isn't so high, if you dig a little deeper, you might find out that the really engaged readers who may be smaller in number are getting to the bottom of your story, are subscribing at the end of that. And so I think that having had the time to learn a lot about analytics as a producer has gone a long way in my time editing.
So I'm sure a lot of you are here because you want to know how to get jobs. So Anika and Vonnai are both very good examples of folks who started at the Seattle Times like straight out of school, right? Both of you. Yeah, so we hired them both straight out of school and they've since gone on to do like 2 or 3 different jobs. And one place that we tend to hire a lot of folks straight out of school at the Seattle Times is sort of in these producer roles where your job is audience engagement, your job is learning how to use analytics to make story judgment, make strategic judgments on what we should cover and what we should not cover. And so both of them have done that in different capacities in different departments of the newsroom. Anika is going to tell you a little bit more about our breaking news operation in our morning team.
Yeah, so our breaking news team involves a morning reporter, a morning editor, a few other editors, and then we have 3 other breaking news reporters. That's because Vonnai starts at 6 a.m., which is a great time to catch up on everything that's happened overnight, but we can't keep her working till 10 p.m. She does have a life. So she hands things off to those other 3 reporters throughout the day. One of them starts at 8, another at 9, and then one at 2 p.m. who works till 10 p.m. So we kind of have this, we try to make it look seamless to readers, operation going where, you know, it's great when Vonnai is able to start reporting on a story early and see it through the end of her day. But then when, you know, different people are available to speak later in the afternoon, when a story is developing, things like that, we have a small but mighty team of 4 reporters who are prioritizing breaking news. You know, we want to be fast and accurate. Those are kind of the 2 words we're always throwing around when we're talking about breaking news. We really often will get up an initial story, and our initial breaking news stories can be like 3 sentences long. But we've, you know, looking at those analytics I was talking about, we find that readers do come back as long as you are one of the first outlets to have something up if you tell them that the story is developing. So we do try to be fast and accurate initially, and then spend some time writing through and providing the necessary context for breaking news. The morning team also prioritizes trending news and news you can use. We have most of our online readers checking in from 7 to 9 a.m. in the morning. And that's when you're getting your day started. You want to know what the weather is going to be like. You want to know if there's any horrible traffic situations on your commute. If there is, you know, breaking national news, you want to know how that's going to affect you. And so we'll try to localize national news like that. And that's kind of, yeah, as we're getting started and getting readers ready to start their day, that's what we're thinking about.
And breaking news is a huge part of our operation, obviously. I mean, all our analytics have shown that, you know, 2 things really bring readers coming back to us. One is breaking news. If you can be first, like Anika said, first, but accurate, well, fast, that's going to win you not just readers, but also Google search traffic. And then the other part of it is enterprise. The Seattle Times has a pretty long storied history of investigative journalism and sort of like deep kind of rich meaty enterprise stories about trends and issues. And so we try and make it so that all our reporters, including our breaking news reporters, have a chance to kind of do some of that breaking news, but also that enterprise, because both of those things are things that we prize. So here's Vonnai to tell you a little bit more about her job.
Yeah, so I'm going to go opposite of what you can see on the screen here and talk about what I did at WSU first. I started as a chemistry major and did that for about a year, my freshman year, and then figured out that the math classes and I did not get along. So naturally, I pivoted to comm. And then I studied broadcast news and public relations, graduated in 2021. And then 2 days after graduating, started at the Seattle Times with Steph as the features news assistant. And the next 2 things that I'm going to talk about, the news assistant and the producer, were roles that I had no idea existed in a newsroom when I was here in college. The news assistant is not around anymore, but it was kind of like an internship. It was a temporary position just for the summer. I think it was even part-time. So kind of just getting my foot in the door, and then did that for about 6 months, and then had an opportunity when someone was leaving features to move into the producing job, which is similar to what Anika talked about. This is a digital role. It's social media, it's analytics. We have people that we call hub producers who do this work for the entire newsroom, but then we also have them for each section. So I was the features producer doing that digital
and
work.
Tell them what features constitutes at the Seattle Times.
Yes, and features is food and drink, arts, entertainment, events, outdoors. So yeah, I was the producer doing the digital work, but I was also doing a bit of writing and reporting. I wrote about at least one story a week, maybe two, mostly events coverage. And I think this is important to know because I let Steph know that I wanted to do more writing. And there was an opportunity in Metro for the morning reporter. And my editor at the time asked me, do you want to do this job? And I said, no. I don't want to be the morning reporter. I'm not a morning person at all. And I kind of had this idea in my head at the time that Metro reporting and breaking news and hard news were kind of above my wheelhouse, that I wasn't capable of doing them.
She had imposter syndrome.
Yes, exactly. I just kind of thought that I was more suited for like feature-y type writing, lifestyle, which I love to use my voice, and that's still true today. But I just was like, I'm going to leave breaking news to the reporters who really want to do that. Long story short, my editor was like, try it out for a week, see if you like it. I loved it, of course, was, really good at the writing, succeeded during that week. And then the rest is history. I've been the morning reporter since December 2022. And some skills that I learned as a producer, I think it goes back to what Anika was saying about analytics and kind of having that mindset, thinking about where your readers already are, what they are engaging with, what they gravitate toward, and using that to inform your decisions about coverage.
Okay, so I guess, Vonnai, what does sort of a typical, like people like to ask this question, what's a day in the life? So what does a morning shift look like when you log on at 6 a.m.?
Yeah, this kind of also goes with the pace of things. So I'll talk about the difference between breaking news and general assignment, and then also the pace. First, breaking news, kind of like Anika already mentioned, the stories that I write are very short. I'm going off of, I like to think of myself as like, I'm on the front lines. I'm usually the first reporter who is covering any type of breaking news situation, especially early in the mornings. So that means that I'm working off of like a single tweet, a press release. It's usually very minimal information. So these stories are like no more than 200 words. It's very quick to write them up. And we always update them later and let our audience know that we're going to do that. So that's primarily the type of breaking news coverage that I do. It's very quick, it's very fast. Of course, we're trying to also be accurate at the same time. And then general assignment on the other side is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's everything under the sun. Some examples of general assignment that I'm thinking about right now is that we have an eclipse on Monday. A lot of people are talking about that. Baseball season just started in Seattle. So it's with general assignment, you're kind of going back to that idea of being in tune with what people are talking about around you. What are people talking about at coffee shops? What are your friends talking about? What do you talk to your parents about? That's a really great kind of idea generator for general assignment. As far as the pace, so I log on at 6 a.m. We have someone at 4:30, very early, who this person on the copy desk is up at 4:30. They're looking for story ideas on social media, in our email inboxes. And then when I log on at 6, we have a list of kind of initial ideas. I call this, like, this is the quickest part of the day. It's a sprint. We call our morning team AM Mayhem because it's just chaos sometimes. And that's because we have a morning newsletter that gets sent out at 7:15. So from 6 to 6:45, really it's like 6:15 to 6:45, I'm writing stories. That first 15 minutes is when Anika and I, or my new editor now, my new editor
Anika
now
got promoted.
Yes. We are in those first 15 minutes, looking through that list of story ideas, looking on social media, deciding, okay, what do we want to put in this morning newsletter? Then I'll spend 30 minutes writing those stories. I think my record is 5 briefs, and we call them briefs because these were like, these were like these breaking news stories that are just, a couple of graphs long. My record is 5, getting them into the morning brief newsletter.
And this is in like an hour and 15 minutes.
Like
no, it's
30,
45.
30,
minutes.
yeah, 45 minutes on a good morning.
45 minutes because she gives me time to edit her stories.
Yes, yeah.
And that 7:15 deadline is strict for a reason.
Mhm.
Again, going back to analytics, like we found that even if you send it 3 minutes after that, we start losing readers. So
Like
we
they
kind of-
expect that in their inbox. So
That's part of building a habit, right? Because
Mhm.
people used to have this habit of you go out to your doorstep and you pull on the print product. Now this newsletter shows up in your inbox. So a lot of our readers are very attached to that.
Yeah. So that's the morning sprint. The busiest part of my day, I would say, unless there's breaking news later on in the day, which of course I will go respond to if it's a situation that we're doing some on-scene reporting. But other than that, the rest of my day, I'm working on general assignment. I'm contacting sources. I'm following up on stories. Some breaking news things are just situations where I have to call someone and maybe we won't cover it. We're just looking for information. So throughout the day, I'm doing that as well. Do you want to talk about deciding what goes into what we cover?
Yeah, for sure. So like Vonnai said, we start at 6 a.m. The desk chief who started at 4:30 has already sent out a note of what she's seeing. But she did that at 4:30 and an hour and a half has passed. So I like to do a quick scan of some Twitter lists that I have, our news tips inbox. And then as fast as possible, I like to keep it to 7-ish minutes. I like to decide what Vonnai should at least start on. And I'm always going to prioritize local breaking news first. We have a lot to catch up on from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And so we will start with any breaking crime news, breaking traffic or like collision news. And then after that, be thinking about, what would be helpful as you're starting your day. Is it going to be weather? Is it going to be traffic? Is it going to be that localization of national news? A good example of that, I think, is every time that they've announced new COVID vaccines, Vonnai or another general assignment reporter has done a guide on how to make an appointment or where to look to make an appointment. And really often readers are responding way more to that story than the initial, like, here's what the CDC said. And yeah, I do want to talk about that decision I'm making for after 6:45 a little bit as well. Vonnai left out a part of the story of the 5 brief morning. So she wrote 5 briefs. Those went into morning brief. And then the sun started rising and she went out to Lake Union, I believe.
Yeah.
Because one of those 5 stories was that a boathouse had caught fire and,
It was arson.
it was arson, which I think you wrote about the next day. But that was interesting as a brief. We let folks know to, like, if you see smoke in the air, that's what it is. But she got out there, was talking to folks who were in the area, people who were going into work that day and saw, the fire start. And so a few hours after that posted, that same file had a lot more information. So even as we make those initial decisions in the first 7 to 15 minutes, I'm already thinking of what are we going to do next to add more layers to our coverage.
And I think that takes us to our next slide.
Yeah, so this is the 4 Fs. I think this slide is finding story ideas, finding sources, forms, feedback, finding follow-up ideas. I think a big part of what I do as the morning reporter is really use this audience that is already in place. Anika mentioned that 7 to 9 a.m. timeframe is when the majority of our audience is online. So being the morning reporter puts me in a really unique position to engage with such a large part of our audience. So finding story ideas, we kind of already touched on this, but I just want to double down and say, like, social media is huge. Using those Twitter lists, which if you don't know what those are, it's like curated lists. I follow one for local media, which if I click on it, I can just see like what other local media is tweeting out, or on X, whatever you want to call it. And then I also follow one for local agencies, which includes like police, fire, for a bunch of cities, Seattle included, and then around the Seattle area, WashDOT for traffic. So that's a huge source for at least breaking news story ideas, because a lot of these agencies especially will post that's the first place that they post anything that's going on, is on their X account, their Twitter account. So that's a great resource for finding story ideas. For enterprise, which is the general assignment realm, it goes back to paying attention to what's going on around you, paying attention to what people are talking about online, on social media. On the next few slides after this, I have some examples of stories that I've done that came from just like being in tune with what people are talking about on social media. So I'll get to that in a second. Finding sources kind of is the same idea as finding story ideas. It's going to where you know people are, but also, and I'm going to kind of skip to forums as well, because these are all connected. But when we have readers email us, give us tips, those can be sources. And then whenever we are on social media and we're seeing what people are talking about, there's opportunities to reach out to those folks, have a source relationship created through that. With forms, this is something that I do quite a bit as a morning reporter, is using a Google form or something called a Hearken. These are things that we can embed.
Explain the Hearken.
Oh yeah, I was just getting to that. These are things that we can embed on our stories. These are call out forms where we have a question posted and readers can type in their answers in the form. We use this obviously to gather feedback and just have a relationship with readers where they're being engaged. And then feedback and following up and finding story ideas also is connected to forms. Do you want to go to the next one? And I'll just kind of talk through these ideas.
Yeah, so real quick, I think we've moved actually from the era of journalism where all you do is like, you are told what the news is every day by receiving your newspaper, right? We're at a point in journalism where I think we've acknowledged that it's important to serve your audience, and how you do that best is to meet them where they are. And that's why all these things that Vonnai is talking about, the goal is to just find out what your audience is interested in. What are people reading? What are the questions that people have about different subjects in their lives? Like stuff like that. And that has really kind of done well for us and paid a lot of dividends over the last few years. For instance, this story.
This story to this day still like blows my mind. It started as a call out. So that was a short story that we created basically with a prompt. For this one, it's Seattle's unspoken rules. So we introduced this idea of like an unspoken rule. What are things that you do that, you don't necessarily have to say that it's a rule, but everyone kind of does it, such as in Seattle, you don't use umbrella. Or you don't jaywalk, you don't honk, no Starbucks, whatever it may be. We created this call out and we gave a few examples just like that and said, readers, what do you think an unspoken Seattle rule is? I believe on this, we had a Google form and we're kind of trying to guide readers to answer on the form. We ended up getting 2,000 responses, which is an incredible amount of feedback compared to some of the other call outs that we do. Those 2,000 responses were not just on that Google form. It was comments on that call out story. It was the Google form responses as well. It was personal emails that I had received, phone calls that I received, and then also a huge chunk of them came from people commenting on social media. Every story that we write at the Times digitally online is also put out on Twitter and sometimes Instagram, and people will, respond to these posts with their feedback. So that was another way that we gathered responses for this story.
I think like 500 were on Instagram alone.
500 Instagram comments.
Yeah, sometimes we've kind of, when we've put Hearken, which is just a tool to create these call outs, when we've put them on stories, we've been tempted to turn off comments just because we want to direct people straight to the form. But Vonnai was kind of adamant on this one that we keep it open just to have as many channels open as possible. And she was like, and I'll mind them all. And then
it was 2,000 responses.
There were 2,000 responses. But working with, again, I think that we tend to think of producers early on in our work because, well, we were there and we know how frustrating it is when you see a story post and then you've got to scramble on the engagement plan. But working with producers early helped us put that out on Instagram as soon as the story, or like very close to when the story posted, which is, I think, why we got 500 responses that way.
And then just another quick note about the unspoken rules. To this day, it remains like one of, if not the most engaged story that I've ever done in terms of like how many people read that story, how many people subscribed to the Seattle Times from that story. I even had one of the editors at the Times tell me that she was at a bar and she heard 2 people talking about it, which I thought was insane. So that was just an incredible example of using a call out and engaging readers in that way. This next story I wrote last month. Unspoken Rules was this time last year. This Tony Delivers was last month. And this is an example of just being on social media. I was just like scrolling on Reddit and I kept seeing mention of this like Tony Delivers guy. I was like, who is this? This is a Reddit post in the left corner here. That had gotten like 2,000 upvotes. And then I like saw him on my own Instagram feed and then on Twitter as well. So I kept seeing him, which should kind of automatically make you think like, is this a story? Why are people talking about this? What's like, who is this guy? So I decided to do a profile on Tony Delivers. Long story short, he used to be an Uber delivery driver. And then that wasn't really working out well for him because in Seattle, there's this new law where the city has to pay them a minimum wage, or I don't know the exact logistics of it, but basically they're not getting as much money anymore. So he decided to take things into his own hands and start delivering food on these bikes himself. And he was like plastering the city with these flyers, and that's what everyone was posting on social media. So that was a fun story. And then another example of engaging readers is we do this, I think we've done this maybe 3 or 4 times now. And this kind of is connected to weather, which is one of my favorite things to write about. But every time a new season is coming around, or we have like exciting weather that's happening, sometimes just to like add a little bit of engagement to a weather story, we'll ask readers at the end, like, okay, here's, that you just read through the forecast. Now spring is right around the corner. Can you tell us, give us your thoughts on Seattle spring in the form of a haiku or in the form of a limerick, some type of poem. Readers love this. They eat it up. Usually we get, I would say anywhere between 50 to 100 responses, and I'll pick out about 10 to feature in a story. And that's an example of following up as well. Like we had an initial story and then it creates a new story just from reader engagement. So really fun opportunities to engage with readers. And it's always great to get that engagement and feel like, people are actually reading your stories. They want to talk to you. They want to be involved in the reporting.
So Vonnai just told you that she really likes weather. So what do you think she did with that?
I decided, and this kind of goes back to my producing days when I would look at analytics quite a bit. And just to give some very quick background on the newsroom, in Metro, which is like our local news desk at the Seattle Times, we have a lot of different subsections. We have politics, we have environment, we have health, we have breaking news, all of these different beats within this desk. And I realized that weather was not an actual beat, but our weather coverage drives such an insane amount of page views and subscriptions. Our audience, for whatever reason, like I always tell Anika this, I could spend a month writing a story and I'll spend 5 minutes writing a weather story sometimes. And like the audience is just at the weather story always. So I noticed that we have this huge audience already in place for weather, but we didn't have anyone in the newsroom dedicated to writing weather stories. So I kind of raised my hand and I was like, I would love to kind of make this into a mini beat and focus on writing weather stories more. As the morning reporter, I do a lot of our weather coverage naturally since it's kind of like a morning thing. What's the forecast for the day? So I was already doing a lot of that work and just kind of wanted to formally step into that role. So that's one of the things that I've done in the newsroom recently.
So Vonnai, what do you think you've learned about yourself and your abilities in this first like year and a half as the morning reporter?
I am capable of waking up at 6 a.m. I thought I would never do that. And that's one of the biggest things. I maybe am a morning person. I think, and it says it right here, that saying yes is something that's incredibly important. And I think this goes back to even before I was the morning reporter and all the roles that I've been in at the Seattle Times, just being open to opportunities. I studied broadcast when I was here at WCU. So I did not think that I was going to end up in print. Didn't think I was going to end up at the Seattle Times. But all of the positions that I've had have been very much so just me being open to trying things out. And also just like being in the position where people are able to see your potential and invest in you. And I think I've been very fortunate at the Seattle Times that I've had editors and people around me that have been really supportive. That also comes with having to voice things that you want to do. I made it clear when I was in features that I wanted more writing opportunities. And then when the Metro reporter role opened up, my name was kind of already in the hat since I had been voicing, like I want to do more writing. So saying yes to things and then just being vocal about things that you know that you want to do or things that you want to try, because if you're not vocal about them, the people around you aren't going to know that you're interested or that you might want to do that. And then also just like believing in yourself. I said already that I thought I could never do breaking news, thought that I could never do hard news, thought that I was like really just suited for lifestyle. And I think I've had a great time in this role. So.
And Anika, what about you? What would you tell your 21-year-old self coming out of college now that you've been in our newsroom and in your third different job in our newsroom, correct?
Yeah. I mean, kind of similarly, like I didn't know what a producer was until I applied for that position. I think it's important to know what you want to do and what you don't want to do, but having a really broad definition of what I was looking for really helped me. I spoke to folks in the positions that I didn't know existed, learned more about being a producer and saw that it was open. I, like Vonnai, started in a temporary position and then, worked really hard and got to stick around after that. And so I think that flexibility, is what let me start at the Seattle Times. I was applying to a lot of audio jobs straight out of college and some engagement ones. I thought I would either end up in audio or at least reporting, and then took a 3-month temporary position as a producer and really loved talking about digital journalism and digital audiences because it was just a strength, the way I get the news. I love newsletters. That's just how I was always getting the news. And talking to folks in the newsroom who primarily got their news from print I realized how much of a strength that was to represent and how rewarding it was to represent digital audiences. So yeah, I think being flexible, saying yes to opportunities that scare you is really important. I had a professor in college tell me that it's good to do things that scare you, but you can usually tell when it's good scary. And yeah, moving into the editing position was good scary. Starting to edit race and equity coverage was good scary. And kind of what you were saying about having, like you put it as, I have editors and people around me who support me. I'm glad that's true. I also think you've sought them out. And so when there's someone in the newsroom who has a skill that I'm trying to work on, I'll ask them to talk about it. If they're somebody who's like work ethic or something like that I really respect, I will try to get on a project with them or something like that. And that's been a really great way to get to know folks in a hybrid work setting and also just develop skills really quickly.
Yeah, so as someone who does a lot of the hiring, like I hired Vonnai, I did not hire Anika, but I did hire Vonnai. I think one of the things that you can do to help yourself the most coming out of school is to just be open to a lot of different things. Like you might have an idea as to like, this is the job that I want straight out of school, but the likelihood that you're going to get that job straight out of school is pretty slim. So then, you should keep that in your sights as this is where I want to be working toward, but be open to other things as well, because you never know what doors they might open for you. Like Vonnai's position when she started with us, it was not an internship. It was a full-time
It's
job.
similar to.
But the full-time job as a news assistant entirely consisted of compiling listings, like compiling event listings, compiling concert listings. And she took that job as a foot in the door and was very vocal and sort of communicative about where she wanted to get. And when you're talking to people about things that you're interested in and where you want to take your career, like people listen. And like as a hiring manager, I'm always talking to people in the newsroom. Like I had a conversation like that with her today. Like, so where do you want to go next? You know, like what job would be interesting to you next? Because if you are communicative with the people around you about where you want to get, you'll find that a lot of people are actually willing to kind of help you get there, and also to keep an eye out for opportunities that you have said you're interested in. So I think that's something that everyone should keep in mind as you're looking for jobs, as you're trying to network. You know, keep your options open. And also, like what she did with the weather mini beat and what Anika has done in our newsroom in different ways. Like if you see an opening somewhere, if you're like, we don't cover that enough and we should, well, you can do that. Like you can do the thing. I feel like if you go up to your boss or your editor and say, hey, you know, I would be really interested in writing more stories about XYZ because it does well with our audience and we don't seem to have a person doing it, I guarantee you like 99 times out of 100, they'll say, great, go do the thing.
If I can add two things to that, one with, you know, pitching your own ideas when you identify a gap. A really smart thing that Vonnai did when she brought up the weather mini beat to me was, you know, use all of the data to show how this was a need our audience was expressing. So this would be serving them. And she tied it to her own development goals that we had already talked about. And so I think that, you know, that can be, once you are in the door, that can be a really strong way to think about what you want to do next, is like, how is it serving the audience? And also, what skills is this going to help me develop? That's how you keep growing. And then the second thing I wanted to add was, we keep saying foot in the door and like, oh, this news producer, this features news assistant position was our foot in the door. There is a difference between getting your foot in the door and paying your dues. I think that like the whole paying your dues conversation is really toxic. And I think that's just something to be mindful of as you're looking for your first position out of college. When I started at the Seattle Times with a temporary position, fully knowing this is a foot in the door situation, I quickly found that, you know, once I showed I was really interested, ambitious, willing to put in the time and work, there were folks asking me like what I wanted to do next, what goals I had, why I was interested in the digital engagement side of things. And that's kind of how I drew the distinction, was that I was doing meaningful work and that there were folks who wanted to see me develop. It wasn't that folks wanted to see me continue to do something that I didn't find rewarding or interesting.
I want to just talk really quickly about the position that probably a lot of you are in, still being in college and trying to figure out where you're going to go next. I think networking is incredibly important, and I could talk about it all day, but it is not what got me my job at the Seattle Times. I mentioned that I was studying broadcast when I was here, and then second semester of my senior year, I was kind of just applying for anything and trying to see what would stick, just like literally throwing things at the wall. And I had applied for a hub producer job at the Seattle Times. At the time, I was thinking, and this is something as a piece of advice, I was trying to see what skills I already had or skills that I had gained here at WSU, how those could apply, not exactly where, like in the realm that I had studied. So I was thinking, okay, I studied broadcast. Now I'm trying to apply for jobs outside of broadcast. And I was doing that because I wanted to work in Seattle. And if you know anything about broadcast, like you have to really work your way up, and that I didn't want to do that. So I was in a position where I was like, how can I get to Seattle? I have broadcast skills. Where can I apply those? So long story short, that's when I came across the Seattle Times job as a hub producer, which is a digital role. I was like thinking, okay, broadcast, digital, kind of similar. Maybe my skills, you know, would transfer. I think about a month went by. I had applied in like April, or maybe it was March, and then it was April, getting close to graduation, hadn't heard back, actually forgot that I had applied for this job. And I get an email from Steph, And Steph is like, your skills actually weren't quite right for that position, but we have something else opening up and we think that it would be a good fit for you. I want to tell this to you guys because I think it speaks to applying for things that maybe you don't think that you have the exact skills for it, or maybe you don't think it quite fits your experience or your major. But just applying, you never know who's going to be reading the application on the other side and what they might pick out and what they might think, okay, maybe she doesn't work, or maybe they don't work for this position, but we have something else opening up that isn't even online yet, which is exactly what happened with me. Steph told me this features news assistant job was coming on and that would be a better fit. And that's how I got my job at the Times. But I would have never gotten that job if I didn't apply for a completely different job, thinking that maybe my skills applied and just kind of said, you know what, whatever, I'm going to do it because why not?
Women, if you look at a job description and there are 10 things on it, and you do the thing where you're like, oh no, my skills, I only have 3 of the 10. Don't do that, because the men do not do that. The men look at a job description with 10 things on it and they go, I got 9 of these, I'm good. When in reality, a lot of the time what they have is about the same as what you do. So don't do that to yourselves.
Yeah, there's so much research showing that. And I think the best advice I got on that was someone telling me that job postings are wish lists.
Yes.
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 They are.
Like you don't always have to have the 3 to 5 years of experience. I don't think I had any of the experience that would have been on the job description for any of the roles that I've had at the Seattle Times, and I've exceeded in all of them, I would say. So yeah, don't limit yourself while applying for jobs. Kind of maybe apply for things that you don't think quite are a fit, but if it's at a company that you're passionate about working at, just apply anyway, and they might have something internally that could work out, or they might be able to just talk to you, and there might be an opportunity there. You never know.
Okay, we want to open it up for questions, and I think there's going to be a microphone going around, but yeah, feel free to raise a hand.
Question. Hello. You kind of already touched on this, but what kind of advice would you give to graduating seniors who are going into the field and like print production?
I would say if you're looking for a print job, to be open-minded. I kind of already said this, but when I was here at WSU, I didn't realize how many jobs are actually in a print newsroom. I thought it was just kind of like reporter and editor. In reality, we have a video team, we have a graphics team, we have a photo department, we have data journalists, we have all of our digital people who do all of our social media and our analytics. Like there's so many roles in what traditionally has just been print nowadays. And I think most of you, or some of you might be able to understand that if you're studying multimedia, it kind of is in line with that idea of, things coming in all different types of ways, but keep an open mind. And even if you maybe want a print reporting job, you can find ways to get your byline out there without being a reporter. So.
Hello, my name's Norma, and I am of junior standing currently at WSU. I was just curious, so obviously you guys were in college for a couple years. Was there anything that you found particularly helpful when getting your foot in the door, like whether that be internships or working for a school newspaper or like joining a club? Was there something, that you would really recommend in terms of like, maybe not like a full-time job, but like an internship or something like that?
Sure, I can start. I think, having those bylines that you can share is so important. And so whether that be from an internship or be from freelancing, oh my gosh, I've certainly written stories that I did not get paid very much for, that I was able to do while I was a student. And those were like really helpful bylines for like community publications. Those were really helpful bylines when I was applying for jobs. I think one big thing that has really helped me, especially when I was starting out, was the Asian American Journalists Association. The Philadelphia chapter gave me a scholarship to go to my first conference, which is where which was the year I graduated, which was where I first met people from the Seattle Times, where I learned what a producer was, all of that sort of thing. So I would recommend looking into professional organizations like AAJA, NABJ, NAHJ, NLGJA, the Society of Features Journalism, which was mentioned in Steph's intro. There's all sorts of things. And those are just really, really helpful networks. And it's kind of a built-in group of people rooting for you who are easy to turn to for advice.
Yeah, we were joking earlier that we like to hire the tryhards and the joiners because that's how you network with people, right? As journalists, I want to know that you know how to talk to people, you know how to communicate. That's what we're all doing, communicating. And the networking part of that is so important because by going to some of these professional organizations, like, I mean, they rattled off a bunch in my bio because being part of a lot of these organizations over the years has done a lot for me in my career. Like, I've met a lot of people who've mentored me, who've helped me find jobs, who've answered questions like this one, like on the phone, or like when you get your first job offer. And every time you get your first job offer, you will get a second. It's like when it rains, it pours. You will always have two jobs that you're like, what do I do? And those are the times where you call on your network of people that you've cultivated who have worked in the field or are working in the field and can help you navigate some of those questions.
I think it's just incredibly important to have experience, however you can get it. It doesn't have to be an internship. I never had an internship when I was in college or didn't have one after college. But just getting experience for your resume, that proves to hiring managers or people that are looking at your application that they have done what we would be hiring them to do. So any way to get your byline out there, even I've gone, seen people's resumes who even just like had a personal like blog or just would write and post stuff online, literally just proving that you have had the experience goes so far. And obviously here at WCU, there's the Daily Evergreen. I did that for like half of a semester while I was here before I switched to broadcast like fully. There's Cable 8. There's so many opportunities here just at WCU to get involved in. But even if you're not getting involved with a group like that, you can just do it in your own time. And just having that experience goes really, really far. And that's a huge thing that you can do right now.
You have another question, Beck?
Hi, everybody.
Jody.
Hi. I started at the Times as a graduate with a graduate degree as an agate clerk. Way back then, get my foot in the door. But Steph, I was hoping for you. You clearly know how to identify great talent. Can you talk a little bit about what you like to see in a cover letter?
I actually think that the cover letter is pretty important because especially if you are looking for a job where it is going to be your job to write, the cover letter in many ways is the first representation that I get of how creative a writer that you are, how clearly you communicate what you want and what you bring to a place. And also a cover letter is where you can kind of have a little fun and have a little flair. And so like, for instance, in our internship pool every single year, we get like 200 something applicants for every single one of our 8 internships. And what usually kind of sets sort of some folks aside when you're kind of going through that many applications is the cover letter, because that's the first thing that I read. It's the thing that tells me whether I should continue to read your clips in your resume, because it shows me usually mostly unedited writing that you've done about yourself. And you should know yourself better than you know anything or anyone else. So if you can convey to me what your story is, what you bring to our organization, and why I should hire you, then that means I'll go on to read your clips. And that should also tell me some other things about your skill set. So I think to include in the cover letter, you know, don't make it a regurgitation of your resume because I can read your resume. Tell me something in your cover letter that I don't get in anything else that you put in that application packet, whether that is, you know, you're a first generation college student and what you've learned about yourself through your first couple years at Murrow, or whether that is, you know, you're a Division I athlete and what that has taught you about like discipline and respect and stuff like that. Like, tell me something in your cover letter that will make me remember you, because you are one of 250 applications that I will be reading, and to pick one. Over here.
Hi. So, my question kind of has to do with like breaking news and specifically in Seattle. Obviously here in Pullman, there's not quite a lot of things that have been going on. There have been in the past week, but that's another story. But like dealing with like, Seattle breaking news, I understand that you guys have different people at different times to cover, but it's so much all at once. How do you guys kind of balance that? And like you said, kind of pick out like the stories that you want to publish and let readers know about?
Looking to the editor.
Great question. I feel like I'm still learning the answer to that question. But that's where news judgment comes into play, which is like this weird amorphous thing that everyone talks about. And so I very often will start with like, what do folks need to know right now? What do we know right now? Are there any ethical questions that I maybe need a second opinion on that I need to step back and spend 1 second thinking about before we post a story? And then, when there are 50 things going on, that's when like having the reps of breaking news kind of helps. I'm a lot more confident making those calls now than I was even 6 months ago, and definitely like 2 years ago. And so I think, it's just a news judgment call most of the time. And 4 breaking news reporters is not a ton. It's great, but it's not a ton. Even if Vonnai can write 5 stories in half an hour, sometimes we do call on other reporters around the room. Obviously, in every beat, there's breaking news. So very often, Vonnai will get started with a breaking news story. And then if it has to do with a police department, then one of our law and justice reporters, when they wake up, will get started on that, or we'll wake them up. If it has to do with city council, we'll talk to a politics reporter, and we'll just get other folks around the room involved. So it is kind of like a juggling act. And that's when it's really helpful to work with reporters who are able to, pause their enterprise, switch gears immediately, get to the breaking news, and then like switch back. And so, yeah, it's just a judgment call. But I think what helps the most for me is thinking about things from the perspective of a reader.
And as I tell all my reporters and editors, like I would much rather, if you're in the process where you're still trying to sift through and learn what we consider like real breaking news, everyone drop things. Like I'd much rather you tell me about it and we have a conversation than you just think, oh, that's not big enough. I'm just going to ignore that and move on with my day, because you never know. I think there's people trying to get into the room. Is our time up? Okay, cool. Well, we're gonna stick around if y'all want to have conversations and ask questions. Like we'll probably mill around outside, but our emails are on the slide. Please feel free to reach out. And good luck. Good luck with your job search and your college careers.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We have business cards as well. So if you find us out there, that also includes